So welcome everyone to the next in a series. This is my second last live on ServiceNow session for this year. And we're going to be covering change enablement in the ServiceNow platform today in this live on ServiceNow webinar. So really the intent of this is, maybe you're an existing customer and you've had ServiceNow change installed for a while, and maybe you're looking for some information about, what are all the features and capabilities that are currently available in the platform or have been available in the platform for some time that you may not be aware of. So when I talk to customers, that is the case a lot of the time. Even though customers have been using change in ServiceNow for some time, they're not always aware of all the features and the capabilities that we have in the platform to help you manage change better. So this is for you. Or you may be a new customer, new to ServiceNow change, and you want to have an understanding of what features are available and how best to use them. So again, if you're in that boat, then this is for you. But essentially what we're going to cover today is we're going to learn, this is going to be an overview. I don't have time to do deep dives into specific topics, but we have done some webinars already this year that do sort of a deep dive into some specific topics. But really the idea is to give you an overview of the advanced intelligent change management capabilities that enable customers like yourselves to transfer and enable modern change in a modern enterprise or modern organization today. Because we have growing demands to increase change velocity and handle higher volumes of change, especially small incremental changes that are coming through from DevOps pipelines and other integrations, for example. And really what that's doing is it's exposing some weaknesses in the legacy change management implementations. So in ServiceNow, we have a very rich change management feature set that helps you to dynamically scale your change and manage that velocity without compromising stability and governance. Okay, so let us move on. We always have this forward, safe harbor notice for any forward-looking statements. I'm not expecting to cover anything that's not on already GA in our product today, but this is just in case we do talk about roadmap items, to not base any buying decisions on those statements. And just a reminder that this is part of a series, so if you want to have a look at and join up for any other webinars, there's lots of interesting topics on the agenda. There's still a few to go towards the end of the year. Scan that QR code or have a look at that link on our community page and sign up and register for some of the other events. So just some housekeeping. We will have time at the end for Q&A, but I would prefer you to ask questions as you go along. So please use the Q&A function in Zoom to ask questions as we go along. I may not be able to see the questions, but I will pause as I'm going through the presentation to have a look and answer anything that's there. As I mentioned, this presentation is being recorded and it will be made available on our community page and on our YouTube community channel. And you will be sent a survey after this session to ask for feedback, because we always want to improve and make sure that we are constantly improving. So a little bit about me. My name is Mike Lampert. I've been at ServiceNow for around 18 months. I'm an outbound product manager in the ITSM business unit and specializing in change and DevOps. And in a previous life, I have a lot of experience, operational experience in various enterprises, managing change, being a product owner for change and service transition processes in general. Okay, so let's kind of set the scene here and talk about how businesses have transformed and how the way we work and the way we deliver technology has changed over time and how that's affecting change management. So as I mentioned at the start, there's an increase in change velocity that we're seeing across our customers, and we're having to handle much higher volumes of much smaller changes. And we need to be able to dynamically scale. But at the same time, how do we do that without compromising the stability and governance that change management obviously has to bring to bear in an organization? So a lot of challenges there across different environments because of the changes that we're seeing in technology. You might have a mixture of technologies that you're having to manage from a change management point of view. Those technologies and the way those technologies are delivered are sometimes very different. And there's usually, in a lot of customers, have a one-size-fits-all change process. And that's really no longer fit for purpose. The old ITIL way of doing things no longer is fit for purpose for managing the modern way of delivering change. So having a look at some of the outcomes that we desire to see, we want to make sure that we can automate the change process as much as possible and remove some of that manual burden because we're having much higher volumes of change and we want to increase velocity. So how do we automate that? And how do we increase deployment frequency, reduce our lead times, get faster time to value, minimize change failures, etc. So those are some of the things that we're trying to address. And I'd say in addition to that, we want to try and have a change management system which is kind of following good practice or best practice, where we can have the governance that we need, but remove some of that manual overhead by automating as much as we can, and also not having a one-size-fits-all process. So having features in the solution which allow you to have a more fit-for-purpose change management process in your tool. Okay, so what we'll cover, I'm not intending to go into a lot of detail on some of the base features that are already there, but I will highlight some specific ones. But obviously there are some core capabilities. So, if you have, and this depends on the licensing that you have in your instances, in your environment. How do you know what licensing you have? Well, you can either talk to your platform owner, or you can talk to your ServiceNow account team, and they should be able to tell you about the licensing that you have. But as a general rule, these core competencies or these core features that you see here, risk and impact analysis, conflict detection, scheduling, blackout and maintenance schedules, CAB workbench, change models, which we'll go into in a little bit more detail, change approval policies, and the unauthorized change features. Now, they are out of the box for ITSM standard. So if you're an ITSM standard customer, you will have access to all those features. And we're going to go into a little bit more detail on some of these. So CAB Workbench, this is not new. This has been around for a while. Some customers use it, some are not aware of it. But CAB Workbench is an interface or a workbench that allows you to manage your CAB meetings. So it will automatically set up a schedule for your meetings and send out, the meeting invitations and automatically handle the agenda, attendees, etc. Once you set that up, it acts sort of like a template, and you can and it will automatically generate those for you. You can obviously also add additional items that you need to cover in a CAB meeting if you need to. So it's not set in stone. It'll build the agenda based on the conditions that you set, and then if you need to add additional records in because things always change, you are able to do that. Then you can conduct the CAB meeting in the workbench, and it provides a dedicated portal to do that, which has reminders and set times to cover each change, and provides a kind of an overview of each change as you're looking at it, so the changes can be discussed and then approval decisions can be made on those changes all within the workbench. So again, not something new, but some customers may not be aware of that one. Now, change models is a recent feature, maybe a couple of years old now, but basically this is to address some of the challenges I mentioned before, where we have an old sort of ITIL based workflow where changes always go through new, assess, authorize, schedule, implement, review, and closure. They always go through that same process for normal change. Obviously, standard change, they're pre-approved, so they don't go through assess or authorized. And you've got emergency change as well. So you've got the three change types, and they kind of follow that same process. So it doesn't matter what the use case is, but essentially you're using the same workflow and following the same state transitions that are provided in the workflow. So what we have with change models is essentially a more optimized way of tailoring your change process based on a particular use case. So they're more fit for purpose, and yet they can help you to increase your efficiency and your change velocity. So, for example, you might have an SRE change, or site reliability engineering change, where you just want to verify the EB and then do an implementation and a closure. EB is error budget. Or you may have an unauthorized change, and with our unauthorized change capability, those will start in review state, and then they'll have an authorized state, and then they close. So it's a much more efficient process. There are a number of other examples of this: change registration, cloud provisioning. You could build one for patching, for example, that only goes through certain states. And when I do the demo, I'll cover off in a bit more detail about how you can build these and what you can do with them. Essentially, you can automate the transitions from one state to another, and you can define the data that you want to be either templated or mandatory before a change will move from one transition from one state to another. So all those things are possible. And essentially what that's giving you, the change models are closely tied to change approval policies and also to flow designer flows in the back end to enable you to automate approvals, automate state transitions, as I mentioned, and have a policy-driven state model and something that is more fit for purpose, defined by a use case and not tied to necessarily the old way of doing things. Also, we have security options now aligned to models. So if you need certain models to be only available to certain groups or people in your organization, you're able to define who can view and make use of those. Change approval policies are a very powerful capability. Again, this was introduced a while back, but not all customers are aware of them. But essentially what they do is they enable you to automatically manage how approvals are done on a change based on the data. So based on the incoming data and based on the conditions in your environment and on the change. So for example, you could automatically approve low-risk changes for a specific service or a specific team that you're happy to provide that automation for, provided they meet certain criteria. You can add manual approval, for example, on other teams who maybe are not doing change as well, or if you have a critical business service being changed, you could add manual approvals to that change. So they're very good for handling those sort of situations. Obviously, all these features and the way you implement them are there to make sure that they're auditable, that they're traceable, that they will provide a means of governance that will meet your IT controls in your organization. And they give you a degree of agility. So, business conditions change and issues can happen, and you might need to quickly adapt to that from a change approval point of view. You might have blackout that you need to implement quickly because of issues in your environment or something that's come up that you need to manage. And with change approval policies, you can easily do that. They also help accelerate time to value because they're really removing a lot of the manual overhead around approvals, and everything is data driven. Now, the next set of features here that I want to talk about are the more advanced features. So for customers who have ITSM Pro, ITSM Professional, or Enterprise licensing, these features are available to those customers. And we'll go into detail, a little bit of detail about these as we go through. So we'll cover change success score, risk intelligence, change velocity dashboard. I'm not going to cover DevOps change velocity or DevOps config today because I've done a number of webinars on those specific topics already. So you can go and have a look at those if you want to deep dive into those ones. I'm not going to cover those today. So change success score, I'll show you how this works in the demo, but essentially what this does is it's a job which runs every night through PA, and it collects data on the outcomes of changes that have already been closed. And it looks at whether those changes were successful or had issues or were unsuccessful. It also looks at any changes which caused incidents and looks at whether they were P1, P2, P3 incidents. And it gathers all that data together and runs an algorithm which does a daily calculation for each assignment group, for each team in your organization that's doing change, and gives them a score. And that score essentially becomes a tool for assessing how well teams are doing a change. So it allows you to look at that score, and that can be helpful in a number of ways. It can help you determine which teams are doing really well and therefore maybe don't need as much governance, or which teams are not doing as well and need some help, need some support, or need some additional governance on their changes. And in addition to that, you can also use that score in a change approval policy. So these things work nicely together, where you can, for example, automate approvals for teams that have a high change success score because you're comfortable for them to have a lower level of manual approval. Obviously, you can also compare individual teams, and there's some kind of gamification that's possible when looking at this. So when we look at our risk intelligence or AI machine learning capabilities, we have a number of capabilities in the platform across various products. When it comes to change management, there's a number of machine learning or what's called risk intelligence capabilities available. So this capability can use classification or similarity learning models to predict the risk of a change based on the data in your organization of previous changes. So it looks across the history of your changes, and it looks at some specific fields that you can you tell the model what to look for, and then it can predict what the risk is based on what it learns. So you can either use classification or similarity models. It'll depend on how much data you have. I think classification requires at least 10,000 records. Similarity is less, and you can have it turned on in two different ways. You can have it predict the risk and then not actually update the risk, but it'll just show you what it thinks the risk should be based on its prediction model. Once you're comfortable that those predictions are accurate, you can then turn that on to actually define the risk for a change so that it's not defined manually, it's defined by the model. So you have that option. And risk in general is has been evolved to be a more modern risk evaluation capability. So when we talk about change risk, there's a number of ways you can look at deriving risk. You've got the legacy risk, which is really based on you have a risk assessment where someone answers questions, and that's more based on subjectivity. So someone can answer the questions one way and they'll get a risk outcome. If they answer it in a different way, they'll get another outcome. And obviously that's very subjective, and people can learn over time, well, if I answer the questions in this way, I'll get an outcome that I want. So what we really want to try and drive, and this is true of many of these features in change, is a more data-based risk calculation methodology, which is not dependent on someone's subjective view, but is based on data and is giving you a more objective view of the risk of a change based on data. So that's really what we're trying to drive. So we have what's called a success probability module, where you can look at, for example, change success score, as I mentioned. So how good is the team at doing change? You can also look at a change model success. So how good are we at an enterprise at doing specific types of change models? And then you can also use a combination of those things to calculate success probability based on those two things. So together, there's kind of a matrix that you can get where you're looking at as I said, a more kind of industry standard modern way of calculating risk based on the impact of the change and the probability of the change succeeding, which is based on all those different factors. ServiceNow will also look at the other methods for calculating risk, and I'll show you some of those in the demo. And then the output will always be the highest value that it finds. So for example, as you can see there, you've got the risk conditions came out as low, risk intelligence came out as low, calculated risk score was moderate, and the risk assessment questions came out as low. The overall value will be moderate. It'll always take a very conservative view for the final risk outcome. Okay, and finally, there's change velocity monitor. This is really a tool for change managers or change management to understand what's going on. Gives you a nice dashboard and helps you look at how your current and historic KPIs are trending and what your current workload is for change. So that dashboard is out of the box for ITSM Pro customers. There is another option for enterprise customers where you can click through to process optimization, which requires an enterprise license, where you can do some work to understand where you have process issues or bottlenecks, or anything to help you understand. You do some process mining and helps you understand what you need to look at from a process point of view in change. Okay, and finally, and I guess this is the latest feature. Now, I do have next month, I'm going into a session, live on Now ServiceNow session, specifically on change in SOW. So if you're interested in looking at this in more detail, because I'm not going to cover this in detail today, please register for that session, which I think is on the 12th of December. But in Service Operations Workspace, you now have the ability, since Utah, to create and manage change across the full life cycle. So this wasn't available in the first iteration of Service Operations Workspace, but it is now. So you can manage the entire end-to-end change process within service operations workspace. And it does so through what are called dynamic overview pages. And that's to reduce clutter on the form. And it guides knowledge workers who may not have specific process knowledge about how to navigate the change lifecycle. It guides them through giving them information and surfacing widgets that they need to complete in order. So it kind of gives them jobs to be done and helps them focus on what needs to be done next. There's also the scheduling view function has been updated in Service Operations Workspace. And that's really allowing you to very easily understand from a scheduling point of view whether you are within a maintenance window or within a blackout window or conflicting with other changes, and very easily manage the scheduling for your change using these dynamic pages. Okay, so we're almost at the demo. Before we do the demo, I will run a poll, and then I'm going to have a look at the questions that we have. So let me just launch this poll quickly. All right, so please answer the poll. Just interested in what features you may be using today. So it's a multiple choice question. So please tick the features that you are currently using today. So we have over 20 participants. So I'll just wait till we get a reasonable amount of responses. If you're unable to respond to the poll, I'm happy for you to put your responses into the chat. I know some customers can't use the Zoom tools, so just put your answers in the chat. Okay, I'm going to give it another 10 seconds. Okay, thank you. I'm going to end the poll and share the results. So looks like many of you today are using change models and change approval policies, which is excellent. And we have one customer using change success score, risk intelligence, and DevOps change. Fantastic. Okay, that's great. Thank you for that. All right. We're going to jump into the demo. So just going to stop sharing and have a look at some of the questions that we have. Okay, because where do we find the details of this algorithm? Is that to do with risk intelligence, Vikas? Is that what you're asking about? The predictive intelligence algorithm? The
change successful, Mike.
Change success score. Okay. It is documented in our docs site, and you are able to configure how the calculations are done. There are some multipliers that you can configure if you want to change what it looks at. If you wanted to add some additional data, there is a way also to do that. If, for example, you wanted to look at, let's say, outages, which is not out of the box, there is a way to include some of that data into change success score, but I'm happy to dive into some of that detail. Oh, Alex answered it. All right, fantastic. Thank you, Alex. Sorry, I couldn't see while I was sharing. Okay. Someone anonymously said we're currently not using any of those features. Okay, no worries. And some other questions. How do you record cab minutes or communicate that back to a bigger audience after the cab? As Alex said, there are meeting notes, and as you capture meeting notes at the end of the meeting, you can send that out from the workbench, and it handles that requirement for you, or everything is documented and attached to the change. Thanks, Alex. All right, let me share my screen and we'll dive into some demo. Sorry, and just bear with me 1 second. Okay, you should be able to see my Chrome browser now. So first topic we'll cover is change models. Now, as I said, change models are a way of being able to tailor your change process for a specific use case. So let's dive into this cloud infrastructure model, which is just an example of one, so we can understand more about how they work and what the capability is. So you can see here, we've got a name, and this button here makes it available in the create new change page. So when you want to create a new change, this cloud infrastructure model will be available there. If you don't tick that, then it won't be.
Hey, Mike,
Yes.
do you mind zooming in a little bit? It's just a little bit small. Maybe you could just zoom your browser in a little.
Sure. Let me do that. How is that?
Maybe one more.
One more. Better?
Perfect.
Cool. No worries. Thanks, Alex. All right. Okay. So what you can do here is you can also set some presets. Essentially, these act almost like a template. So I am setting, or the system is setting type normal and assignment group to the network team, category to system software, and risk to low. Now, when you set these values here, and obviously you can go and set any other values on the change, they will be grayed out for the user. So the user will not be able to make any updates to the values on these fields. So you just need to be a bit careful about what you choose to preset here. If the expectation is that data needs to be updated by the user, then don't set it here. Now, in the security section here, this is where we're able to use roles for read and write, etc., to determine who can view and who can edit and who can make use of this particular model. And down here on this related list are the model states. So you can see this model only has 2 states defined: authorize and close, and the initial state is authorize. So when you create the change, it'll immediately go to authorized state. Underneath that, you have the transitions from one state to another. So let's have a look. This one is going from authorized to close. And you can see here we've got an automatic transition. So once I define my conditions for transition, the change will transition automatically, and I won't have to manually push a button or select a value to move the change from one state to another. So let's have a look at some of these conditions to understand what they're doing. You can see here this one is approval, and it's looking for the change to be approved. So obviously, if the change is not approved, it's not going to allow it to move to closure. And the next one here is saying these fields, short description, configuration item, planned start, and planned end date, should not be empty. In other words, I will want to see values in these fields before I'll allow the change to move to that next state. Okay, so that's a very simple example. So let's see how it works. I'm going to, this is my create change page. So when you click on change, create, new, it's going to take me to this page, which is showing me a number of things. So this is showing me all the models that are available in Create New. So I can see I've got normal, emergency, DevOps, my cloud infrastructure model, which we just had a look at, and change registration. Pre-approved, that's all my standard changes that I have access to. So these are the pre-approved templates. All will obviously show you everything. And I'm also able to pin models. So if I said I want to pin that one and pin that one, it'll only show me the ones that are pinned. So let's have a look at this cloud infrastructure one. I'm going to select it, and it has created the change with some of those templated values as we saw. So category, risk, assignment group, that's grayed out. I can't alter those ones. So let's just put in a description in here. Let's say provision new EC2 server for maintenance app. And we will put in a date. Select any date here, just for the purposes of the demo. I'm going to save this record. Now, this is to show you that configuration item was a mandatory field. So I do need to select a value here. I'll select cloud hosting services and save that one. So what we should see is the change should go straight to authorized state, which was the initial state for this model. And it has done that indeed. And then the next state is close once I populate the required information. So what we'll do is the next step is to authorize it. So you can see it's sent some approvals to the network team. I will approve on behalf of the network team, just to show you how this works. And the change has gone straight through to closure. Now, obviously, this model needs to fit your organization's change process, your controls, etc. One of the things I do want to point out here is closure information has been populated already. I didn't do that. So how did that get populated? So it's assumed this one was successful with some notes put in here. Now, maybe that's not good practice, but what I want to show you is how that works. So if we have a look at the flow, which is associated with this model. So every model will have a flow in Flow Designer associated with it. And one of the it basically manages the what happens at each step. But one of the things it's doing in this update step here is it's filling in those values for those fields. So it's setting approval to approved once I've approved it, and setting close code to successful with those close notes. So it's just showing you the power of what you can do, combination between the model and Flow Designer. Okay, let's have a quick look at risk conditions. I will come back to questions if there are any. All right, so there are a number of ways to manage risk within ServiceNow for change. So you have what's called a risk conditions, and I'll just show you an example here. So what these are doing is, so I just need to move my Zoom panel out the way. So this one, obviously insufficient lead time. What it's going to do is, given these conditions down here, so if planned start date has a value, and the start date is before 3 days time, so it's less than 3 days time, it will set the risk to high, and it will leave impact as it is. So that's essentially how these work. They alter the risk and the impact depending on the conditions that you set. So I'll give you an example of that. Let's go and create a new change again. I'm going to create a normal change this time. And what I will do is I'm going to use a template here just to quickly populate some of the fields. So I'm going to use this demo prod audit template. So that has templates are very powerful for quickly inputting information. So all these fields you can see with a little tick have been filled in by my template. I can also click here and have a look at exactly what was changed or what was updated by the template. So I'm doing an update to this production audit configuration item. So let me save that change. And I will schedule this one, let's say, for next week. Okay, now I'm going to do the risk assessment. So I'm going to answer the questions. Hopefully, Alex, can you see the pop-up? The risk assessment pop-up, is that showing? Alex?
Sorry. Yes, it's showing.
Okay, cool. I wasn't sure. Thanks, Alex. Sorry.
Couldn't find my mute button. Sorry.
Sorry. All right. So I'm going to answer the questions to try and drive a low risk outcome. I'm going to say, it's not a critical business service. It's an easy change in terms of complexity. Back out is easy. I have redundancy, and it's easy to verify. So I'm expecting this to be a low. Let's submit and see what happens. Okay, so it actually determined that risk is high. So what happened? So I can either click here to view details, or I can click on this eye. They both bring up the same modal. Hopefully you can see that pop-up modal. So you can see here, risk conditional rules set the level to high, and that's because a critical service was affected. So even though my risk assessment was low, the risk conditional rules overrode that. And that is based on the criticality of this particular service. So if I just do a preview of this service, you can see business criticality is 1. It's most critical. And if it's 1, I have a risk condition which says set the risk to high. So that's essentially what's driving that one. So that's risk conditions and how they work. Now, predictive intelligence is also playing a role there. So in this particular case, it couldn't predict the risk because I don't have enough data on the change for it to predict the risk. You can also see calculated risk score was set to moderate based on the change model and the team's change success score. So let's talk about change success score for a minute here. When I assign a change, you can see this little icon here, which will allow me to bring up a little pop-up to look at the change success score for this particular group. So it's there's no because this is a demo environment. There's no real data here, so that's why these counts as 0. But essentially, this score here goes from 0 to 850, and you can see the ranges here. You're able to modify these, by the way, if you want to. But you can see this team has a low change success score because it's less than 499. So what we can do is we can have a look at the change success score dashboard. Now, this is giving us every team's change success score across the enterprise, and it's giving us our overall average change success score for our enterprise and number of successful changes, etc., etc. So again, this is not real data, so some of these values won't be real values. But you can see here I've got my ITOM rock stars who are right at the top. So this is a leaderboard. I'm able to look at my entire organization in terms of who is doing change well and who is not doing change as well, who needs some help. And I'm able to look at their specific records. I can filter by a particular assignment group if I want to dive into them. So I have that dashboard available to me. And by having this icon here, for example, if I was able to assign this to my ITOM Rockstars team, they have a much better change success score. So maybe I want to give this change to them. You can also, as I said, modify the approval process depending on that score. So approval policies come into play next, and I'll quickly dive into that. I can see we're running out of time quickly here. So let's quickly talk about change approval policies. Change approval policies, I'll go into the normal change one to show you an example. What they have, and I, by the way, I have a webinar where I dive into detail just on change approval policy. So if you wanted to understand this in more detail, you can have a look for that webinar. But essentially, they have inputs. Inputs are data from the platform. So this can be data that already exists on the change record. It could be data that we are looking at from any other table on the platform, or even that we are bringing in through an API into the platform. So it's any data that's available as an input. And then we use that data to make decisions about what we want to happen. And the policy can either run every decision, or it can find the first decision that matches. You're able to determine how you want that to work. And I'll just give you an example here. For cab approval, we are saying here the conditions are the change request must be active, obviously, and that the risk is either high or moderate. And if it's a normal change type and it's in authorized state, I will invoke this cab approval group approval. So I'm either able to add a group or add a user, or I'm able to specify automated approval or automated rejection on an approval policy based on the data. So very powerful capability. One thing I just want to quickly show you is this one. Change is outside a maintenance schedule. So sometimes you may want a way to manage, hey, we have people who are running changes, but they don't run them within the maintenance schedule. How do we manage that? Well, this is a way to do it. So in this case, I'm looking at whether the change is outside the maintenance schedule, which is a value on the change request, available on the change request table. And if that is true and the state is in assess, then I want my service owner to approve the change. So let's have a quick look at how that works. So I've got a normal change here. Again, I'm going to use a template to quickly populate the change with some values. So I'm going to schedule this change, let's say for Wednesday. Just plug in some dates there. and save the record. Okay, the first thing you'll see is this blue informational message here. So this is telling me that the CI that I selected, I'm scheduling this change outside the maintenance schedule for that particular CI. So that's a warning to me. Let's do the risk assessment. And again, I'll plug in some values, hoping for a low risk change, and submit. You can see that the risk has been set to high. And if we view the pop-up, it's telling me that insufficient lead time. So it's because I scheduled the change within 3 days' time, it's going to be a high. Also, risk intelligence here has said, hang on, this is going to be a high. I'm expecting or predicting this to be a high change. Okay, so let's say I ignored that. I ignored all that information and I wanted to just go ahead anyway with my change. So I'm going to request approval here. And what I'm going to show you is the power of the approval policy. So I now have 3 approvers on my change. And you can see here that there's 2 policies that have been applied. The first one is the peer approval or assessed technical approvals from my own team, that assignment group. And the second one is that one I showed you where the change is outside the maintenance schedule and the CI owner is going to want to look at this change and approve it. So you can see here, I've got 2 people needing to approve from the assignment group. So we'll approve those. And the other approver, Fred, famous Fred, has been added because Fred is the service owner for this rewards processing service. So looking at the dependency map for this particular CI is going to show me the impact of changing that Linux server and how that's going to impact that rewards offering service. So obviously that is going to have an impact because I'm taking that server down. This is showing me that dependency, and it's going to bring in the service owner for that service to ask for a manual approval because I'm scheduling it outside the maintenance window. So another really good capability there. Some of the other things I quickly want to show just in the last few minutes before we get to questions. The change velocity dashboard. So again, this is a out-of-the-box dashboard if you're an ITSM Pro customer, which shows you this widget is how many average time that changes are waiting for approval over the last 30 days. And obviously these other ones are, how many changes are waiting for CAB, how many high-risk changes do I have, overall approvals, some breakdowns in terms of change model, change type, change category, etc. And then some of these are more useful, which is historical pipeline. So the top change success performers, this is coming from change success score. Highest change activity is showing me which CIs are being changed the most in my organization. So I can have a look at that and see if there's anything I need to do about, why are we seeing so many changes for this particular server? Is that an issue or is it expected? And you can see some trending information for change success, change risk, and change volume to help you manage your process. And there are also some process KPIs for change velocity dashboard. So some of these widgets I don't have data for, so that's why they're not displaying, but there's some useful KPI information to help you manage your process. The last thing I want to show you just quickly before we dive into the questions, as I said, I'm going to have a detailed presentation on this. So this is just a kind of a trailer. When you create a new change in service operations workspace, what does that look like? you've got your normal models that are available to you as I showed you before, but it's only going to show me information that I need to see in order to move from one state to another based on jobs to do. So based on things or items that I need to complete, it's only going to show me some limited information. If I don't know much about the change process, it's kind of helping me. I only need to populate a short description and justification, and I can save that. And then the dynamic overview page will show me the next section that I need to complete. So I won't go into detail on that now. I've got a session on the 12th of December to cover that. So let me stop there. No worries. All right. Thanks very much, everyone. Appreciate your time, and we'll see you at the next one. Have a good afternoon.
Thank you all.
Bye.